Good morning,
Please,
everyone.
it's rough, yes.
I'll catch you later. I'm on standby. I'm on standby. I'll see you.
Hi, Dr. Nduka. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hi, good day.
Lawrence Hill Lawrence Hill has joined us. Good morning, Lawrence.
Good morning, Louisa. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you more for joining. You can see how excited I am. So please, sometimes if I slip and call you William, try to understand. As a postgrad student, I worked for a bookies called William Hill. So everybody would always come. But thank you so much for making our time to join us today. This is the Ottawa Black Book Club. We still have more people joining us, as we go. We're happy to have you here. So this is us. My name is Olunosen Louisa Ibaze. I'm the founder of the Ottawa Black Book Club. I started the club when I moved to Ottawa, and I was looking for like-minded people to connect with. We meet on the last Saturdays of every month from January to November. And then we have this wonderful admin who helps out. Alice, Ganis, Jamila, Ria. They are going to join. Alice is here. So thank you and welcome, everyone. I'm just going to read out, a short bio. I'm just going to read out Lawrence's short bio so that we can start talking about the book. So Lawrence Hill is the internationally best-selling author of 11 books of fiction and non-fiction, including most recently Beatrice and Croc Harry. The Book of Negroes, which was made into a 6-part TV miniseries, and The Illegal, both of which won CBC Canada Reads. His previous novels, Some Great Thing and Any Known Blood, also became national bestsellers. Hill's nonfiction works includes Blood, The Stuff of Life, and the memoir Blackberry Sweet Juice on being Black and white in Canada. Hill is a professor of creative writing at the University of Guelph. His volunteer work has included Crossroads International, the Black Loyalist Heritage Society, book clubs for inmates, the Ontario Black History Society, and Walls to Bridges, a nonprofit group offering university courses to incarcerated Canadians. Hill is writing screenplays for a TV miniseries in development and a novel about the African-American soldiers who helped build the Alaska Highway in northern British Columbia and Yukon during World War II. He is a member of the Order of Canada and a winner of the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Rogers Writers' Trust Fiction Prize. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Louisa. I really think it's fabulous that you've created this book club. And I have to compliment you on your hat, which looks to me like a Sunday morning church hat, but you're wearing it on a Saturday morning.
Yes, because, I saw the recent Dove advert where people were being discriminated for being gray. Everybody's talking about keeping gray. So I'm all gray. So yes, so I'm advocating for that. Yes, keeping my gray. So yes, so that's it. So welcome again. I'm just going to get into this book. So I started reading it and I got a hang of what was going on when I got to chapter 4. And I went, okay, this style of writing is very, very different, because I came across, the first time I came across your book was in 2011 when I visited Canada for the first time, and it was Book of Negroes. And I remember reading that book and keeping it somewhere and saying one day I would like to meet this author and talk to him. So everything has come full circle. So the style of writing in this book is very different from your other books. I also read Any Known Blood last year, and it was very, very different. And you said your inspiration for writing this was based on the bedtime stories you would tell your daughter Beatrice. In African societies, we have the culture of storytelling, but I wouldn't call them bedtime stories, but they tell it's the oral folklore, which is usually told after dinner, before bedtime. So when I got to this, I went, okay, bedtime stories, But her relationship with the croc, I was like, okay, what a very, very testy kind of relationship. Okay, what's going on here? Is he going to eat her? So I wanted you to speak more about that. Yes. Why a crocodile? Why not a dog? Why not something harmless? Why a crocodile?
Thank you so much, Louisa. I guess I'll begin by saying that I'm glad you find the writing style different. Surely you don't want to see me writing the same book twice. And we have to stretch and grow as artists. And I already wrote the Book of Negroes, and I have to grow and work in new directions. And I have been interested. I've been publishing books now for 30 years, and it seems that we all have our obsessions. I mean, Mordecai Richler writes every book he wrote, and he was a world famous writer. He wrote about the Jews of Montreal. And Alice Munro, it seemed to me that her lifelong obsession has been writing about white people in southwestern Ontario in small rural communities. And she's a world famous Nobel Prize winning author, but she focuses on white people in rural southwestern Ontario. And I think my lifelong focus, my lifelong obsession, if I may, when it comes to writing, seems to be about people who are displaced, people who are searching for home, people who belong to, I'll use the term loosely, to the Black diaspora, who for one reason or another have been booted out or forcibly removed or have migrated for one reason or another to another place and are searching for themselves, searching for home, and searching for their identities. And of course, that's a natural obsession for me to have grown into, growing up, in a white suburb of Toronto in the 1960s with a Black father and a white mother, both of whom were immigrants from the United States. And so I had to work as a young person to develop a firm and strong and proud sense of Black identity. It was an odd and kind of racially ambiguous crucible in which to grow up. So I think that led me to a life of writing. And Beatrice and Croc Harry is yet another way for me to examine issues of pride, of self-love, of the search for home, of forcible and violent dislocation, of what it means to be removed forcibly from one's home and to have had one's memory, in this case, erased. And of course, for me, that speaks metaphorically about the Black experience, the concept of memory erasure and kind of violent removal from one place to another. So to answer your question specifically, Louisa, the crocodile, because first of all, every story needs an antagonist, and every protagonist needs a challenge. And if she just has a pleasant dog, there's no story. She needs somebody who could kill her. She needs somebody who poses a threat, somebody whose relationship has a possibility of being perhaps a little dangerous, but perhaps very rewarding too. And so Beatrice really has to face a predator. I suppose it could have been a lion or a grizzly bear, but it definitely has to be a predator, somebody who has a potential to cause her great harm. And she has the responsibility, and this is unfair, but it's been the case of so many Black folks over the course of the centuries. She has a responsibility of sort of taming this predator and learning to teach him to get along with her and not to kill her, but to become her friend. And so she has this obligation to convert this predatory relationship into one of a very deep friendship.
Okay, thank you very much. And for me, reading the book, what struck me most was the importance of, so my favorite character here is Horace. I love Horace. That's my favorite character. I thought Croc Harry would be my favorite. After some time, I was like, nah, I'm done. But Horace, I love. I really, really love Horace because, that's somebody seeking attention, asking to be respected. And another thing that struck me in this story was a lot of questions. How could you? How can you? Like one of the first ones was, how could a person see herself in the mirror and not even know her last name? So when I started I was wondering, okay, when I started the story, okay, maybe everything is going on in her mind. Who is this giant that is trying to get into her brain? That's another question too that got me asking. And then the stories people choose to share. Experiences, because everybody had a story. Fuzzy had a story. Croc Harry, I was a little bit confused because when I got to the end, I was brokenhearted. I finished it and I was like, no, because I started out not liking Croc Harry. But when I got to the end, I started to warm up to him. When he turned and said she should put her hand on his, his chest and feel his heartbeat. And I went, oh, that's true. Everybody needs love. Everybody wants friends. So what was it why was he hyperverbal? What was the reason behind the use of words? Because I pride myself as someone who knows a lot of words, but when I came across the words here, I went, okay, so what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Why did he have to be hyperverbal? Why?
Thank you, Louisa. Well, of course, he doesn't have to be anything except what I wanted him to be, and wanted to create a very colorful, vibrant, unusual character. So what better than a crocodile with a huge vocabulary and 69 teeth? It seems that, we're all full of contradictions. And in this crocodile, he has a terrible history, which he doesn't really fully understand yet. But he comes himself from a very violent and terrible history, which he has also had erased from his memory, and he's beginning to recover his story, just as Beatrice is beginning to recover hers. And together, their job in this novel is to find their stories, to find out who they are, and to go on this road trip, so to speak, and to try to discover who they are and where they come from.
Okay.
Why the hyperverbal quality of Croc Harry? Well, I grew up in a household with a lot of conversation. My parents were both writers of Black history. My father had been a Black soldier, in the Second World War in the American Army, but he was also a sociologist, with a PhD in sociology. And in the course of a single sentence, he could slide from sort of vocabulary that sounded like a professor teaching a sociology class right into sort of soldiers Black speak from the down south in Louisiana or something. He could slide in a sentence right across the entire register of human expression and move from one form of speaking English into another, which I found really quite exciting as a child to watch a person code switch, as we say, to watch a person slide from one form of English expression into another, even in the same sentence or paragraph. It was terribly entertaining. My father used to make up words such as goozlem, which represents the organ in your body that holds the soul. So the goozlem is a mysterious imaginary organ located directly north of the hippoflump in the human body, and it represents the human soul. So if you're a good person with a good soul, perhaps maybe you'll have a goozlem. So I learned all sorts of silly words, invented words from my own father at bedtime. And bedtime was a magical time of storytelling, sometimes with highfalutin fancy words with 4 or 5 syllables, and other times with entirely made up words. And I was looking to resurrect the joy of language that I experienced as a child at bedtime. And I wanted the reader to sort of luxuriate in the play of language. And also I want children to feel how fun and silly and over the top and playful language can be. So it seemed to me just appropriate and playful and a wee bit silly and kind of happily exaggerated to give a crocodile a massive vocabulary.
Oh, okay. That's very, that's very nice. Because as I was reading it, I went, this book is supposed to be for young readers between the ages of 9 to 14, but it also appeals to adults.
I hope so.
Yes, because for me, I was looking at it and I went, okay, these new words, I just got curious. Like that, this was my first time of coming across the word, your uncle is Bob, that term.
Bob's your uncle, yes.
Yeah, never heard it, heard it. And I saw the stories you put, the 2 short stories you put about it there. And I'm wondering, okay, but you brought up the issue of colorism here and then hair. It's interesting how, for me, until I moved to Canada, I realized that the experience of Blackness is different for those of us born and raised in Africa than those born and raised in Canada. For me, when I was back home in Nigeria, I was just Louisa from the Esan ethnic group from Edo State. But when I came to Canada, I realized, oh, you're Black. Yeah, and sometimes, there is this thing where, you hear people say, those of us who come from the continent and come here, we come from a position of privilege of the experience of Blackness because we've not really experienced racial discrimination as much as the people who are living in Canada have. So you mentioned, here where she said, where he was, Croc Harry was referring to her skin as being black, being brown. And then later in the book, the issue of skin color too came up, where those soldiers, were they human? We're asking for them to shoot her. Were they human? I was going to ask you that towards the end.
Yes, she was moving towards human civilization, and she was, unfortunately for her, the very first human beings that she encounters as she's trying to find her way back home turn out to be people who are very hateful and who have nothing but racial malice in their hearts. And so, yes, she encounters some soldiers who have evil intent. And I found that touching and sad, but somehow appropriate for my story, that this girl who's trying to find her way home, who doesn't even know what her last name is, who's just beginning to dawn on her even that she's Black, because why would she be thinking about that if there are no other human beings around, to sort of reinforce that concept of who she is. It seemed appropriate to me, that, and sad, but right for the story, that the first encounters that she should have with the human race would be encounters of hatred.
Yeah, because I read that, and I went back this morning again and I read it on page, for those who have the book, sorry, it's the way this book is written. I would have loved to talk about it chapter by chapter, but I can't because the issues cut across. So we keep going back and forth. So on page 322, where you said, my skin is brown, but I am Black. That woman she met, my skin is brown, but I am Black, so are you. A hunter in the contested lands called me Black, and the giant called me Black. I hated being reduced to a color. And the other lady goes, you are right to be upset. They spoke with ugliness in their heart. But Black is another thing when it is said in the right way. When it is said respectfully, it refers to people who have a common origin and whose ancestors came long ago from a place called Africa. And for me, this resonated with me and I started to question the definition of race. Race isn't, as much as, Black people, we come from a place called Africa. Race, the definition of race is political, it's not biological. I started to question that. Then I'm wondering, okay, if she's living in the midst of animals, why is it important that she's brown? Why are they talking about the fact that she's brown? And then her hair. She had, when, who did she meet? Was it Killjoy that was asking her to run a comb through it? And she said, she needed to do something to it before combing it out. So it brings us back also to the politics of hair. So what is it about Blackness that is so political? Our skin color, our hair color, the way we show up. If as a Black woman, you're outspoken, you are defined as aggressive and not assertive. So what is it about Blackness that is so political in Canada and in regards to this book?
Well, thank you for that very easy question, Louisa. I will say that, first of all, of course, I agree with you, and any thinking person would agree with you that racial identity is entirely an invented sociological construct. Racial identity is an arbitrary way to define and divide people, historically used for purposes of implementing hierarchies among human beings. And so it's a concept that we have invented, and it has no connection whatsoever, as you say, to biology. But still, even though it's an invented social construct, it's entirely real in the lives of people when their identity is reinforced for reasons positive or negative, for reasons violent or peaceful. It's a real thing that people experience in real ways, even if it doesn't have a biological connection. And of course, what was interesting for me about this story is that I've had a lifelong fascination, as I mentioned at the start of my comments, with the evolution of and the concept of identity, and specifically Black identity. How do we see ourselves? Who are we? How do we gather? How is our identity constructed internally and externally? And this has been something that's always fascinated me, and it comes up over and over again, and hopefully in different ways in my books. And in this book, especially writing for adults, but also for young readers, as you say, 9 to 14 especially, I wanted to explore that in a different way. And the way I thought would be interesting to explore the acquisition of the development of racial identity is to have my character, Beatrice, awaken in a forest with zero memory. She's suffering from complete amnesia as a result of the violence that has been perpetrated upon her. So she wakes up alone with no other human beings in a forest that is so large that it seems inescapable. She has no memory. So it's a fantasy, but it's a fantasy that I found very appealing and seems connected to the real human experience, even though it's a fantasy. And so we, the reader, get to watch her begin to acquire a positive sense of self-love and identity. And I thought, I thought was a really interesting way to present to children the idea of the acquisition of and the development of racial identity, because they get to watch Beatrice go from zero to relatively well-formed in terms of how she sees herself. She's a child, and she's beginning to grapple with these things with no help from the outside world because she's all alone. So it just seemed like a really rich and sort of pregnant way to explore her own identity. And so you ask, what is political about Blackness? Well, everything is political about Blackness because it's a politically and socially constructed fictitious thing. It's a ludicrous and completely false narrative that attempts to define people along lines that are scientifically invalid. But still, we have to grapple with it. And still, we know in our lived experience that it has an effect on us, especially, say, as you mentioned, in a place such as Canada or the United States. And so this was a chance for me to try to explore these very complex issues in ways that even a 9 to 14-year-old could begin to grapple with.
Okay, thank you so much. Lala, you had your hand up.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I want to say that I am a huge, huge fan.
Thank
you. When I arrived in Canada 20 years ago, I just found your books in one of the libraries in Montreal. And then I've engulfed all your books. So to piggyback on what Louisa said, arriving as immigrants, there is no justice in history. They never taught us all of these things that you have given us, okay? Like how Black people actually were, we know people were enslaved, but you really gave us a picture in all of your books on how they have come to progress. And I know that you said you don't want to write the same book, but I'm sorry to break the bubble, sir. You found a way to write the same story to a different group of people. I have my son here who is 15.
Hello.
If we get a chance, he will give us his own perspective. So I just want to pick your brain and see how you arrived to the point where you feel like, okay, another another generation needs to know this story. For example, the story of segregation, not segregation, the story of marginalization with Beatrice, all the things she faces. And I haven't finished the book, but I now know that the first humans she met were armies who didn't like her. So it's an irony, right? Because this is the story, this is the life we live as especially immigrants. Because like Louisa said, it's a different thing for us. Not that it makes it better or not to discount anything. It's a different thing for us because we're facing what we didn't even ask for. Nobody asked for it. We're facing things like, what are you talking about? I'm Nigerian, now I'm Black, So we face that every day. So I wanted to pick your brain on how you arrived on transcending from the baby boomers who have read your book and people my age in our 40s, and now you have the youth. Did you feel like, was there an event in your family? I know you're a father that prompted you to say, you know what, I need to address this issue in another way.
Thank you so much, Lala. And by the way, what is your son's name?
My name is Khalid.
Hi, Khalid. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Well, yes, there was an event that sort of provoked, and thank you so much for your comments, Lala. I really appreciate them. There was an event that provoked my decision to write this book. I actually was working on another book at the time a book I'm back to working on now, which is a story about the thousands of African-American soldiers who found themselves in the far north of Canada during World War II to build the Alaska Highway. And it's a story of Black people in the Arctic that is very not very well known, but I wish to popularize and write a novel about. So I was working on that book some years ago, but I was really in a lot of pain. My mother had just died, and I underestimated how much that would sadden me. Her death would sadden me. And I was dealing with the grief of the loss of my mother. And somehow I was having trouble focusing on that other novel, I think because the grief was too intense. And so after a month or two of batting my head against the wall and not making progress on that other book, I sort of asked myself, well, what do I have in my heart? What can I write right now? And how could I write my way out of my own grief at the loss of my mother? And this is a book that presented itself to me. It wasn't like an intellectual decision. Now I'm going to write a book for children. No, it was a decision that sprang from my soul. It was a need to express myself in a joyful, playful, a little bit ridiculous, overly exuberant way with lots of silly made up words, and to sort of bring back the joy that I felt as a child at bedtime, and also the joy that I felt as a parent when my own young children, I have 5 children, when they were young and I was telling them bedtime stories. And so I was looking to sort of steep myself in that sort of loving space of stories at bedtime in order to pull myself out of grief by remembering some of the best parts of my own family experiences. So I wrote the book really to write a sort of an exuberant, joyful fantasy that would help me emerge from grief and move my way back to feeling whole again. So I guess I'm sharing with you that, you know, I don't write a book because I have some intellectual decision. Now it's time to do this. I write the book because something wants to leap out of my heart and I have to obey and listen.
Well, thank you. Whatever mission was accomplished. Thank you so much. A lot of kids my boy's age will be getting this from me as a birthday gift in the next couple of years.
Thank you.
And I
Khalid, did you have a question or a comment?
When I was reading it, I was wondering why Croc Harry was always picking on Beatrice.
Well, I mean, when you have a character in a story like Beatrice, a main character, you have to give her problems. And if she doesn't have problems, there's no story. Because what is story? Story is about people working out their problems. That's what the essence of story is. If you wake up in the morning and have a fabulous breakfast and the best hot chocolate you ever drank, well, that's nice, but there's no story there. The story happens when people are in trouble and they're trying to work their way out of trouble. And that's why we read, because we're interested in learning and following and caring about this character who's in trouble. So if Beatrice is not having any troubles, there's no story. And so Croc Harry is the instrument, one of the instruments that I use in order to create some turbulence, some trouble in Beatrice's life in order to really create a story. And also, I'm interested in unusual relationships. I'm interested in relationships that shouldn't happen, because that's part of the magic of human experience. Relationships that come out of nowhere that don't seem right, but somehow still are beautiful. And so I thought, since I'm really going to be fully imaginative and write a fantasy, what better way to explore the unusual than to have a little girl become a very close friend with a 69-tooth hyperverbal crocodile? It seemed like a nice way to explore some of the ironies and some of the unexpected natures of the way people connect. Because although Croc Harry is a crocodile, in my heart, I'm thinking of him as a person, with human characteristics. So I wanted to explore that unusual relationship because I thought it would be, well, interesting for me and also entertaining for the reader.
Well, I had thought that Croc Harry at a point, initially I thought Croc Harry was a representation of the society. That was how I saw Croc Harry in my head. Because if as you read the story, you discover that there are a lot of hidden messages and a lot of intersecting factors. One, she's a short girl. First of all, yeah, because I remember when they were talking about it, and I think Horace jumped over her, leaped over her one time, and I'm wondering how insulting. So 1, she's a short girl. 2, she's black. 3, she has an afro. 4, she's lost. And the first time anybody ever said to her that she was beautiful was when she met Fuzzy. And then I look at, okay, so fine, there's the issue of race, then there's the issue of social justice with the rabbits. Why would they not give access to the spotted, I think it is the spotted ones?
Yes, the speckled rabbits, yes.
Speckled rabbits. And I was reading, I was thinking, okay, maybe the speckled rabbit had some diseases. Nothing. It just made no sense.
Well, racism makes no sense. Discrimination makes no sense. And I was trying to reflect human society. The fact that people were segregated or discriminated against, it makes no sense, but it's still, unfortunately, it's a fact of human life.
Yeah,
And
because
so for me, this was a reflection of human society.
Yeah, because I was reading it and I was wondering, okay, Matilda, what's going on? What's the problem? And then the one that came and asked for food, something to eat, and was sent away. I said, but if you guys unite, things might just get better. Life might just be easier. You wouldn't have to be eating, you wouldn't have such low supply of carrots if only they would have cooperated and decided to work together. Alice, I see your hand up.
Yes, my hand was up. Well, it's up. Good morning, sir. Well, I think everybody who's here is going to say the same thing. I have discovered you also in your book, at least, your books in a library in Montreal a few years ago when I came to Canada. For me, it's a long time ago. And for some reason in my mind, because the first book that I read was Books of Negroes, and it sticked in my mind. And for me, you were a historian. You were a history teller. So when I discovered the other books, I was like, wait a second, why is he trying to trick me? You are supposed to be in this particular box. But this particular book, sir, let me tell you, you have brought back my younger me. I started the book, and I'm not gonna lie, up until the 4th chapter, I was like, okay, where are we going with this?
Me too.
Sir, you're losing me a little bit. You're losing me. But then I told myself, okay, keep on going. Maybe there is there is going to be some explanation. But then from chapter 5, I found that there were so many subjects, political, social, human relationship, that brought me back into my younger age. Because when I was reading the first chapters with the big words, I was like, I don't know if my 9-year-old or 14-year-old niece will understand this. But then slowly, it kind of brought me to reflect on so many subjects. You talk, Ariza and yourself, and Lala mentioned it: discrimination, racism, not being able to work together, because as human beings, you would think with everything that we have gone through, walls, civil walls, conflict, we will learn from those things and we try to work together to build a better place. But now instead, we always trying to fight one another, find things to discriminate about others, find ways to put people in ghettos and things like that. So that kind of took me in, that was my reflection as an adult. But I was surprised by how the book took me back into my youth, a younger age, when I was a teenager and I was in a high school and I was looking at popular kids, and I realized, wait a second, I was one of those mean girls. Because I remembered some conversation where I might have not been as nicer as I was supposed to be. But all of that to say, my question, that was my comment in regards of how receptive this book is, and how I can't wait for my daughter, who is 9 now, to get through it. She did listen a little bit because I wanted to see if she will be interested into the book. So I kind of got the sample of from the audiobook. And she was like, when am I getting my copy? I said, well, let mama finish the book and then you can, I'm not buying 2 books. There's one, you can read the one we have. But coming from a background, my family is from Rwanda, and I grew up with my grandmother telling me stories at the end of the day before I went to bed. My mom picked up on that tradition, and then now I'm picking it up with my daughter. Every night we have a story. She can go to sleep if mama doesn't tell her a story, or if she's at her grandparent, grandma and grandpa have to tell a story. So that has kind of grown in within our family. And I find that this is the type of stories that you will like. The crocodile for me, it made sense because I'm like, I'm from Africa. That's normal. Like, that's an animal that we will talk about. Elephants, crocodile, tigers, lions, they're always populating our stories. But what I wanted to know is, did you do it on purpose for this book to be speaking so much into not only younger people, but also help us adults reflect on what it is that we might be facing on a regular basis without really telling us and putting it into us in the face? Because I think people get overwhelmed because we see it on a daily basis, and it gets to a point where we're like, okay, I don't want to think about it. Was it something that was done purposefully, or is it something that just happened to be?
Thank you so much, Alice. It's so nice to hear your thoughts and to hear what you have to say. And I'm really glad that you stayed with the book through the first few chapters and gave it a chance. I'm glad that you stayed with it, and thank you. By the way, as for big words and words that might not be understandable to children, first of all, even as adults, we often read books and we encounter new words. And I don't want to underestimate the intelligence of children by talking down to them. And I wanted to sort of infect, if I can use that word playfully, infect the child with the sense of play of language. And most of the words that do come across the page, they're defined in the context, not just in the back of the book, where there's a glossary, or a little dictionary, but also most of the words that come across the page, most people could understand them because they're defined in the context. And so I wanted to sort of aim high, rather than aiming low, in terms of like stimulating the reader's intelligence and the reader's play of language. And although it's a book that is formally, by my publisher, formally marketed to those readers who are 9 to 14. I mean, I wrote it, and I wrote it to please myself. I wrote it because it's a kind of story that I would love to read, and I still love to read a beautiful story for children. And I know many adults who still would love to read a beautiful story for children. There's no reason why we can't read books for adults and books for children too. And there are some beautiful stories out there for children, and so I just wanted to be one to write that. And I wanted to, just as you say, kind of get into that magic bedtime feeling where even the impossible becomes possible. Even crocodiles and tarantulas can speak and become friends. I wanted to enter a kind of a magical world, but I also wanted to explore, really deep and serious issues, but hopefully in a way that was sometimes funny, sometimes entertaining, a little light, not too heavy. And it's, as an artist, as a writer, it's actually, for me, quite challenging to write about painful, serious issues in a light way with a comic touch. It's not easy to skate kind of deftly over top of painful issues and not hit the reader over the head or make the reader feel lectured at, but to engage and entertain and to be a little bit funny and a bit over the top. It's hard to do artistically. And that was my main challenge in writing this book, to explore issues that were very deep to me, very dear to me, issues that mean the world to me, but also to do so in a kind of a light way with a deft touch.
Okay. Alice, you say you have one more question?
Yes, thank you, sir. That's definitely. So one of the things that I loved about the book also was the fact that I realized that,
What's that, please?
for me, sorry, my apologies. That was my phone. One of the things, actually, Louisa mentioned earlier her favorite character. For me, it was Beatrice. And the reason why is because when we start the book, she is this blank page where she's rediscovering everything. It can go bad or good. And I think that's one of the reasons why I kept on reading, was because I was like, imagine if you had been, like, everything that you know has been erased and you have to rediscover everything. But her resilience, her attitude towards the fear, the things that she was going through, the way she has being able to look further than what was appealing, because at the beginning of the book, she's interrogating herself a lot, and she is definitely convinced she's going to be the buffet for Harry. She was going to end up as a lunch or something, but with time, she opens up not only to herself, but she's also this young, resilient, strong woman. And for me, being a mother of a daughter, Black young daughter, I found that this is the best way to tell your child, never be ashamed of who you are. Grow, be accepting, be nice, be kind to others, but don't let life put you down. Grow from what you know is best. And I don't know if it was something that you did you wanted to, for me, this is the best way to highlight the beauty of Black women, if I can say it like that, and praise Black women. Was it something that was done purposely? I know my questions are all purpose related, but it's because that's how the book, that was the vibe that I got from the book.
Thank you again, Alice. Yes, absolutely. I hoped very much that my reader, whether they're 9 years old or 90 years old, I hoped that my reader would admire the confidence, the beauty, the resilience, the self-love of this girl. And, we don't get to choose our own skins. We don't get to choose, our own parents. We don't get to choose where we come from. And I would hope that every child on this planet, and absolutely including all Black children, grow up with a sense of self-love and self-affirmation and self-acceptance. And I did not. And it took me a while to grow into a place where I could love myself and feel good about who I was and how I looked. And I didn't want any child to experience some of the tumult that I experienced growing up. And so, yes, absolutely. One of the reasons I wrote this book was so that I would let that love radiate out and to encourage other people, especially young people, to feel that it's okay to love themselves as who they are.
Thank you very much. For me, I'm just looking at I'm just holding up my copy here, and page 48. I remember I put a note here in my purple pen where I said, now I'm getting the hang of the story. I loved when Horace Harrison Jr., when you introduced him into the story, and he had a slur, the way he speaks, and she suggested therapy. She said, yeah, speech therapy. And I liked when he said, don't need speech therapy, don't need blended vowels. Perfectly good the way I am. Okay, so now this takes me, I've gone there, now I'm going back to the dream. I want to link that question to the dream she's always having. So this is page 33, where it said, Beatrice wondered if she might find answers in her own dreams. It was uncomfortable digging through into her dreams because they seemed to be filled with two horrible scenes. In the first, there was singing. The choral voices, altos, sopranos, tenors, and basses were achingly beautiful and made her think of family, home, and community. But in a flash, the singing became screaming, and she was covered in her own blood. And then further down, it goes again to talk about this man. He was trying in some strange way to take control of her, to use her to enter the forest. So I'm looking at this forest. I'm not looking at it as a physical forest. I'm looking at the forest as the mind and the society. I am looking at this man as colonization. And then the dream, I'm looking at it as when people were forcefully captured and taken from the motherland and brought to the Americas. Brought to the Americas, stripped of their identity, stripped of everything that made them, stripped of their essence, basically. And then brainwashed, brainwashed with religion. This is who you should be. You should obey your masters, be obedient slaves. Trying to escape slavery is a mental illness, because I remember coming and reading that somewhere. So do you think that a time will ever come where we will be free of this injustice? Free of, free to, how do I put this? Do you think a time will ever come where there'll be the freedom to just be your authentic self? free, because you know, sociology, I read sociology as a first degree, and there's something I remember that struck me in sociology where they will always say, are we as people prisoners of our societies? Are we prisoners of our societies? Let me put it that, let me frame the question that way. Do you think we're prisoners of our societies?
I will begin by playfully referring to sociology, because since both my parents were sociologists, and they of course read Emile Durkheim as sociologist. Whenever I misbehaved when I was 8 or 10 years old, my father would point at me and say deviant behavior, and he'd start quoting Emile Durkheim, the French sociologist. But do I think we'll be free of societal prejudices? Do I think that we're prisoners of society? I think life is a process, and I don't actually believe that human society will ever be perfect. I think even our children and our grandchildren and our great-great-great-grandchildren will be having to confront social injustice in some respect in their own lives, and will be having to lead their own struggles to right the wrongs or the evils of whatever is happening in the world then. So do I believe that we're approaching perfection as a human civilization and that maybe our grandchildren will know it? No, I don't. But I think the beauty in some respects is in the struggle, is in saying to oneself, here I am on this planet Earth, and I want to radiate love, and I want to combat injustice, and I want to stand up for what I know is right, and I want to choose love instead of hate. And I want to propagate that and to advance social justice in every respect. So I don't think that we're heading toward perfection, but do I think we're prisoners? No, I think that we have agency, and we hopefully many of us have the opportunities to gain agency and to advocate for what we know is right and what our children know is right too. And interestingly, I think any healthy child grows up knowing instinctively what is right and what is wrong. Children are acutely conscious of social injustice and unfairness, and they speak out about it. And in a way, I want to encourage children too to raise their voices. Children can be heard, and children can also change the world with their voices. And anybody who doubts that, all we have to do is look to the incredible efforts of children around the world today to advocate on behalf of climate change. Some of the most profound influencers in human behavior today with regard to addressing climate change and global warming are children. And I think that's fascinating. Children are lecturing us adults about how to act better on this planet. And so I don't think we're prisoners, but I think we're in for a permanent ride to always be on the lookout for and to trying to address social inequality.
Okay, thank you very much. So Esther has her hand up. After Esther's question, I'm going to read out a question from Professor Nduka here. Okay, so Esther, what's your question?
Thanks, Louisa. Thank you, Lawrence, for honoring us with your presence here today. I'm privileged to be part of this book club and to have read that book. It was very fascinating for me. Almost as everyone here has said, when I started the book, I was like, where is it going with this? Should I look at it as an allegory? Like I was trying to say, okay, maybe it's an Animal Farm kind of thing, because I already sensed the political injustices and all of that from the beginning, but I just wanted to get a grip on what the book was about. And then of course I read it to the end, and one character that I have questions about that really intrigued me, I'm going to use the female pronoun for her, Killjoy. Killjoy seemed to be a little all-knowing, and I'm curious about her, but for me, the interpretation I gave to that character is that she seems to represent so many who have been displaced, who have been forcibly displaced from their homes. And from the things she said, it seems some of them eventually resign to fate where they are. They accept it as the norm and just flow with the trend. And she was also there to say, I'm not sure you can, like, she had this mix of energy that she was giving to Beatrice. It's like, we're all here. This is our new life. Let's just live as we are. Let's make the best of what we have right now. Or you can take that journey, Many of us don't really trust that you can, but why not try and see if you can? Some have gone ahead and they couldn't make it. So it's more like there are some of us as humans who have been forcibly displaced and we've resigned to fate. We don't even, we're just taking life one moment at a time. And there is Matilda, who I wonder, how did Matilda get to this forest? If this forest was supposed to be like a healing ground or something, how did her life just go into this state? And for Beatrice, her moving from that state of, no, I'm not going to stay here, this is not where I belong. She just had that sense of dissatisfaction. This, I know within me, even though I don't have a recollection of where I'm originally from, I know I shouldn't be here. I need to journey to Utopia. But she had to, of course, like you said, I'm picking back on the last thing you said, like the determination and all that. She had to go through lots of hurdles. And so many people might not even be willing to, or might not be able to undertake those adventures, because I kept saying, what if she doesn't find clue number 5? What's going to happen to her? And she moved onto that land. Of course, she still faced the hurdles on the road with the soldiers and all that she and Croc and Horace had to go through before getting to that land. So is that her homeland? Is that like a creation, an artistic creation of the ideal world where there is equity, equality, where you can be whatever you want to be? And as the forest, in as much as there are various interpretations to that forest, as you have presented in the book, is it also a state of, say, let's use the Black community who are now somewhere else, and there is not so much that majority are able to do because of the constraints that are around them? So it's a mix of a question and a comment, but my mind was just all over the place, and it really centered on who Killjoy was. What was your intention with that character?
Thank you so much, Esther, for your comments. I wish I were in person because I have a feeling this conversation could linger much longer over tea or coffee or something. I'm very interested in Killjoy. She is deliberately mysterious. I would like to write a sequel, and I'd like to explore Killjoy much more in the sequel. But Killjoy is clearly, if you're reading carefully and reading, thoroughly from beginning to end, there's something wrong in Killjoy's past too. And clearly she's stuck in this place. And, she's a little bit edgy. She's got a character. She's not always happy. Understandably, she's experienced some wrongs in her own life, and she's a bit edgy, but she also has all this love that, that does come out in her advice for Beatrice, and even in taking care of her and taking care of her hair, and helping Beatrice to form a sense of, or to begin to help plant in Beatrice the seeds of self-identity, the seeds of self-acceptance. So she has an important role in the story, but clearly something wrong has happened in her life and she's unhappy about it, and she's struggling still with it. So she's got this love that's kind of buried under the surface that comes out in the way that she does care for Beatrice, but she's also understandably a little angry because she's been done wrong. And Killjoy has been done wrong, and I guess we're going to find out more in the sequel about just exactly what Killjoy's story is. But I'm very attracted to her character, and of course I know lots of people, especially women in my life, especially on my African American side, aunties and grandmothers and the like, who had all this love, but who also had a pretty big pile of frustrations and of disappointments in life that they had to wade through. And so their interactions with me were often a little bit like Killjoy's interactions with Beatrice. Sometimes a little hard-edged and a little bit of an attitude to them, and other times sort of teeming with love, but the love came out a little grudgingly.
Thank you so much. So there's a question here from Professor Nduka. He said, thank you, Lawrence Hill, for writing this beautiful book and for honoring us with your presence at the Ottawa Black Book Club. My question is, in writing this book, did you think about the emerging fascination with speculative fiction and Afrofuturism, which has encouraged the development of Black or African fantasy fiction, as represented by the Nigerian American writer Nnedi Okorafor?
Well, yes, of course, I'm thinking about Afrofuturism. This is a work of Afrofuturism. This novel is set in the year 2090 and or beyond, and we're in a world where fossil fuels have dried up and people can be magically sent through time and space through a device known as teleporting, where they can just be sort of shot through time and space into another land. And so we are in a made-up fantasy, and this is a speculative work of fiction. But I guess I want to emphasize that even though, of course, it's speculative, and we're in a world where things happen, that don't happen today, I felt very much that I was writing about society today. I felt very much that the issues, the struggles, the personal challenges, the sadness, the pain, the alienation, the self-love, that Beatrice feels and her journey, I feel it's very much a contemporary journey that can apply to many people today. And that's one of the beauties of Afrofuturism. It's one of the beauties of writing fantasy, is that you can have a made-up world that somehow magically, even if you can accept the fantasy, even if you suspend your disbelief and you step into the story and say, okay, let's go on this ride. Okay, the crocodile talks. Let's go on this ride and let's suspend our disbelief. Somehow, fantasy, Afrofuturism can sort of strip away your defenses as a reader and get you really thinking about your own world in ways that sometimes are really powerful. I hope that's the beginning of an answer to the excellent question.
Thank you. When you were talking about that, and I was just thinking of society, I was just looking at, her interaction. I think this is where she met Matilda, yes. And there were some statements I think Matilda made that, I asterisked, where she said, confidence is a good thing, child, but you should know your limits. And I'm wondering, it's a good thing. Okay, fine. You should know your limits. And then she went, I think this is Beatrice saying, I don't think they appreciate being called speckled. And then, can you deny that speckled rabbits have hearts and bones and blood just the same as you? And then, you can't show these speckled ones any latitude. Give them an inch and they'll take a ... So it's almost like saying, you know what? Deprive them of knowledge. How they say, as Africans we say, my people perish for lack of knowledge. Deprive them of knowledge, and you can bend them, you can twist them, you can mold them into what it is you want. Is that true? Is that what you were trying to say by making all the statements in regards to the speckled rabbits?
In creating Matilda, I'm trying to recreate the incarnation of hatred and racial prejudice. I'm trying to demonstrate in a character the manifestation of hatred and of the tendency to discriminate and to segregate. And there's something wrong with Matilda. Clearly, she's ill. Clearly, she's been vulnerable to an attack by the giant, and she has been infected with hatred. And it's a subtle thing, but I'm interested in exploring the origins of hatred. And even Beatrice has to explore and discover a little bit the origins of hatred in this book, because she will encounter hatred, specifically in the form of Matilda, but also in the form of the giant who's trying to attack her brain and get into it. And I'm interested in the idea that I think that hatred flowers, if I can use, no, I won't even use that verb, but I think that hatred takes root, takes an awful poisonous root in our brains when we are most afraid and when we are most vulnerable. And somehow people go to hatred, they shouldn't, but many people do migrate towards hatred when they are at their most vulnerable and when they are afraid. And so I'm trying to introduce that concept by showing that in the novel, when a person is having a nightmare and they're all shaken and vulnerable, their brain is vulnerable in the middle of a nightmare, it's vulnerable to attack. And that is the moment that the giant in this fantasy tries to seize, to enter your brain in the midst of a nightmare when you're at your most vulnerable, and to use that opportunity to plant hatred, to plant the seed of hatred. And Beatrice refuses to let that happen. Beatrice refuses to let that hatred, to let that giant in his representation of hatred enter her brain. But he's trying, and she's keeping him out. And I'm interested in exploring in a quiet way that's not too direct or not too pedantic, the idea of the resistance of hatred, but also Beatrice is on a journey to try to discover it and to try to understand what on earth is going on here and why is there this hatred in the world. So she actually has an opportunity to begin to explore the roots of hatred because she turns the tables on the giant and enters his brain, which I thought was very interesting. So again, we're in a world of Afrofuturism. We're in a world of fantasy. We're in a world of people trying to get into each other's brains. But really, what is genocide? What is hatred? Than the planting then at its origins, it's the planting of hatred, in people when they're at their most vulnerable.
So this means, so in other words, you're trying to say every human is capable of evil. Because remember, there was the point where Croc Harry said Beatrice isn't capable of evil. And I was wondering,
Well, I don't think I was trying to say that every human is capable of evil. I suppose it's possible that we're all capable of doing terrible things when none of us are perfect, none of us are angelic. But I don't think I was, in my heart, I don't think I was trying to advance the argument that we're all capable of evil. What I was consciously trying to do was to advance the argument that Beatrice is consciously rejecting and refusing evil, and she's refusing to allow evil to sort of plant itself in her heart and in her brain. So she's showing some courage, and she's trying to understand why this rabbit Matilda has these moments of hatred and why this giant is trying to infect her brain.
Okay. And then I was going to ask, what was it with the oats?
Oatmeal?
Yeah, the oatmeal. Because for me, oats, I don't like oats. I use oats as a face scrub. So on and on, I'm like, I think Lawrence likes oats because you went on how she would prepare it and all of that. And then the point where she poured glue into Croc Harry's mouth, I said, that's so unfair. Why? Why?
So unfair. Well, he was trying to eat her. She's got to lash out.
It's a predator.
He's a predator, so why not glue his mouth shut with oatmeal? I mean, clearly I'm trying to be playful and to entertain the child and the person who's reading this book and to write something that's kind of over the top and ludicrous and hopefully a little bit funny. But you have to give a character things to do. People become interesting on the page when they have things to do. And in doing things, they begin to manifest their character. So rather than just passively telling a reader, this is this person's character, you want to try to illustrate Beatrice's character by giving her things to do. So she's working on her hair, she's making oatmeal, and she's trying to find a way out of this forest, and she's fighting off the giant. So she needs things to do in order to allow her character to develop on the page. So oatmeal is, I mean, she's alone in the forest, she's got to eat. And so I just thought it would be an interesting way to begin to manifest her character.
Okay. At the point, I wished the book had illustrations in it. That was when you introduced Fuzzy, the tarantula. The way she was described, I wish I could see her because I wrote in my notes here, I said, wish it had illustrations. Because Fuzzy's kindness, I wasn't too comfortable with it because I went, okay, a tarantula is dangerous. And, she said here, I only bite animals that threaten me or that I desire to eat. Here, put your hands down. I wouldn't have been that trusting because remember, she's a tarantula. And then here, as they go on, she said at a certain point, you have to trust your friends. So it got me questioning friendships because I remember one time I heard Steve Harvey said his father used to say something that loyalty has an expiry date. He always says that you know what, loyalty has an expiry date. So I was just wondering, what is it? Because Fuzzy, yeah, she was kind, but the way I saw her attack the snake, I was wondering, okay. But she explained to Beatrice that it was not going to kill you. But if it had stung you, it would have hurt really, really bad. And it would have made you, feverish. So what was it about friendship? What was it about friendship you were trying to show in the relationship between Fuzzy and Beatrice? Because she's,
Well,
yeah.
interestingly, two of Beatrice's closest friends are animals that could kill her or cause her great damage. The crocodile and the tarantula. Now, of course, Louisa, in real life, I wouldn't let a tarantula crawl up my arm either. But this is a fantasy, and we have to accept that this is a fantasy. And so I was trying in a playful way to create an unlikely, but I hoped very beautiful relationship between this girl and this tarantula. Interestingly, without giving away too much of the story for those who haven't read to the end yet, both Fuzzy and Croc Harry save Beatrice's life. Both of them are predators, but they both intervene to save her life in different times and in different ways. And so, you know, I'm interested in friendship, and this story is partly a meditation on love, not romantic love, but the love of friends and the love of species, of creatures, of people, you know, that come together in unexpected ways. And so it seemed to me entertaining and rich and full of potential. That two of the characters that Beatrice should become most attached to are predatory in nature. And it speaks to her character and to her boldness and to the openness of her heart, that she has the courage to be open to the possibility of friendship with these creatures that could possibly kill her.
Okay, thank you. Camille, you have your hand up.
Hi, quick question, which Esther did touch on previously, but I am curious because there were so many themes and subplots in the book. You did say you were gonna do a sequel, but I feel like you could have a series on Beatrice or a series on the Queendom or Argelia or whatnot, because not only Killjoy am I curious about, I'm curious about the system in the Queendom, in that, yes, we have the giant and what Croc Harry did, but their story also came out that they felt excluded, and so they felt like they had to resort to whatever they're doing to hurt others. And the whole testing thing, they're saying that Beatrice was not tested to be in the leadership, but the queen was defending her and said, but yeah, she was taking care of her mom. She is queen, she's leadership material, and defending her. Also, Fuzzy made it out as well. She hid in the bag, and Fuzzy's there. Is Fuzzy a personality? Is Fuzzy a person? Like all these things, all these questions at the end of the book.
Thank you. And Camille, did you have a specific question about these things? And was your question, is Fuzzy a person, or did you have a different question?
My question is, would you do a series rather than just a one sequel? Because for me, there were so many that I don't think one other book would cover everything.
Well, we can never cover everything. And I think we have to accept as writers that we can only do a little bit. We can't do everything. Even if I wrote 10 books, which I won't, about Beatrice and Croc Harry, you can't cover everything. You have to decide what you will write about and what you will leave to the side, because it's just too much. So the most I can really think about right now is a sequel, although there is a television offer that's been made. And so that might provide other opportunities to explore the story, but I don't know if that contract will be successfully negotiated or not. Let's see. But maybe that would be another avenue to explore more stories about Beatrice and Fuzzy and Croc Harry, and of course, Horace Harrison Jr. the third.
But towards the end, she mentions her name, her full name. I'm trying to find where, because I had it in the, I had ticked it in a pen where she mentions her name, Beatrice. There's a middle name, then there's a last name. So yes. I was going to ask, yes, is that was that her aha moment? Was that her moment of realization of, this is who I am, this is who I've chosen to be, and this is what I want to, who I want to be? Was that her aha moment? I'm trying to find it here.
Beatrice learns her name when she is in the Purple House and she's reading newspaper articles about the attack and about what the violence in the church that led to her being expelled from the human race. And so it's in the moment that she's reading about the newspaper stories about the attack in the church that she discovers her last name. Is that what you're asking, Louisa?
Yes. So was it because for me, like I said, I don't see Agila as a forest. I see Agila as a state of being. I see
It's a metaphor, yes.
Metaphor. I see it as the human mind. So when I saw that name, I went, "Ooh, this could be her aha moment." Because I was careful not to say, because even that's why I asked you. I said the people who were chasing her and trying to kill her, were they people? Because I'm just thinking, okay, fine. If all this is going on in her head, if all this is going on in her mind, would this be her aha moment when she realizes, okay, this is who I am, this is why I'm here, this is where I want to go?
Well, when she realizes her last name and reads about what happened in the church, it's part of an aha moment. I don't necessarily believe that there's just one moment when everybody's identity comes into visibility. I think that the evolution of identity and self-concept is a constant thing. It doesn't end when you're 12 or 25 or even 55. And, we're always in a state of evolution in terms of how we see ourselves. And there's so many factors that play into our self-identity, into how we understand our positioning in the world. So I wouldn't necessarily call it the aha moment, but I call it a moment in which she is propelled into more understanding. And of course, she wants to know her name. She wants to know who she is. The erasure of name is very much part, unfortunately, of the African experience in the Americas. And so, she wants her name. And so she's going to get it. And that is part of the recovery of her lost identity. And this, in short, if I had to write a sentence, this is a novel about a girl in search of her lost identity.
Okay. Alice, did you have your hand up?
Earlier, but I can come back to it because we kind of touched it a little bit. So one of the things that really also kind of stayed with me through the book was the ability for Beatrice to kind of be understanding towards others. And I can, so maybe that's because I'm coming from a social service background, but I found it to be extremely speaking in terms of for those who are kind of taken away from their houses or from their background or from the country without really having any say on it. And it made me think about children who are in the system. And maybe it was also because I was reading about an article in US about how the system is basically crowded with kids who are unfortunately don't have enough foster families. And we are facing the same thing in Canada right now. Foster families are less and less. People are less and less in taking into kids from the system and helping them. I was wondering if that is one of maybe the subject that you had been inspired from, or is it just because you wanted to put an emphasis on how human should be maybe work on themselves and be a little bit more accepting in order for us to have an environment, a more positive and healthier environment to live in?
Thank you, Alice. What a beautiful question. Yes, I was inspired by something, and it did shape the way that I imagined this book and the way that I came to it. For about 15 years, I've been working in prisons, in federal penitentiaries, mostly as a volunteer with book clubs who if a prisoner shows good behavior, they're allowed to join a book club, and then they invite me in to spend a day with the inmates and to talk about the book of mine that they've just read in their book club, and to spend a few hours together having a meal, having coffee, just talking, and just recognizing their own humanity. Despite the fact that they're behind bars, they're human beings and they're deserving of conversation and a recognition of their humanity. And also I've taught. I'm a professor of creative writing at the University of Guelph, and so I occasionally have taught creative writing to incarcerated women, in a federal penitentiary in Kitchener, Ontario, near about an hour and a half west of Toronto. And when I go into prisons, I don't ask what people have done. It's none of my business. I'm not their judge. I'm not the Crown prosecutor. They've already been judged by somebody else, and they've been sent behind bars. So it's none of my business to ask why they're there. It's my business to talk about books and to talk about literature and to recognize that they're hungry. The ones who come to me, the ones who want to be there, they're hungry for human conversation, for intellectual stimulation, for some recognition of their humanity, just for some time together to have a conversation that isn't focused on what did you do and how bad was it that you were and how terrible a thing you've done. And so because I don't know what a person's last name is or what they did that got them behind bars, it's kind of an interesting way to get to know somebody, because you start to learn about the good things about them long before you might become aware of the bad things about their past. And in a way, Croc Harry represents that kind of person that I've come to know in prisons, because Croc Harry has done something terrible, something that's almost unforgivable. But that's not how we first meet him. We first meet him with a glimmer of humanity. We first meet him as a kind of a troubled soul who becomes a loyal friend to Beatrice. And we learn a little bit about his humanity, if I can use that word ironically. I know he's a crocodile, but we learn a little bit about his humanity before we discover his awful history. And I found that a really interesting way to explore a character, to begin to show something good about them before we unveil the horrific. And so to answer your question, yes, my prison experiences as a volunteer and as a professor behind bars helped influence the way that I created that character, Croc Harry, in introducing him sort of in a somewhat positive way to the reader before the fullness of his horrific history comes out.
Thank you very much. I remember here you on page 194, when you were talking about Killjoy. You said Killjoy describes her love of dance to Beatrice. She says, "I love to dance to be whole and to unite my colors. I can be not just black or white, but I can be both." And then throughout the novel, it's interesting how, when I was talking about the stories people choose to share about themselves, but the things the characters do to make them feel free. Like for Beatrice, is speaking up against injustice. For Horace, it's learning all that he can and demanding respect. I love Horace. And demanding respect, And then for Killjoy is dancing expressively. For Croc Harry, he's interested in developing that relationship with, it's the constant reaffirmation that I won't eat you, I won't eat you, I won't eat you. How important is it? How important do you think it is for we as people to have the things that make us feel free? Because in the Western world, they talk about all of that, being in myself, that's Zen. Those of us in African societies, first of all, in African societies, therapy is a luxury. When you complain, if I can't imagine going to my grandmother to say I'm depressed, she's gonna ask you, you're depressed. Do you have food to eat? Yes. You have a job and you earn a salary? Yes. You have a roof over your head? Yes. So why are you complaining? Yeah, that is just all you're gonna get. Why are you complaining? Please go away. Go think of other things. So how important is it? How important do you think it is for us as people to have what makes us feel free? Because those of us who are here in the book club, I love books. Books and writing for me is one of my greatest escapes. I am able to go into that world, build characters, write what I want to write, kill them off, bring them back. Yes. So how important do you think as a writer that it's important for us as people in the society we are in today to have what makes us feel free despite the ugliness of the world and the injustice? How important do you think that is?
What a beautiful question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. It's a very beautiful and soulful question. And clearly, one of the ways that you feel free, Louisa, is to read. And reading in a way frees your imagination to just go soaring and just go wandering wherever it needs to go. And for the prisoners that I work with, Reading is also a form of freedom. Reading is also a form of escape. Reading is a place that can take not just a prisoner, but a child or any other person into a world where they can just lose themselves and be free as they're encountering a world that's entirely imaginary. And there's something very beautiful about the human imagination and how restorative it is to engage the human imagination. And so sometimes even when we are imprisoned, literally, we can set our minds free and we can experience some joy and some love, but by letting our minds wander, through our imaginations.
Okay.
I do want to say, I completely understand what you're saying about how an auntie or a grandmother, say in Nigeria, might have had that response. I completely understand that. And I have lived and worked, in Cameroon and Mali and Niger and Eswatini, and I understand what you're saying. But I also feel the need to state my opinion that there is a profound amount of mental illness in North America, in Canada, and including it affects people from time to time in Black communities. And I think that it's very sad and it troubles me profoundly that there's such a stigma to acknowledging mental illness that many people go untreated. Many people in my own country here in Canada are in desperate shapes and in desperate need of help. And mental illness is no less severe an affliction than cancer or a broken leg. It's a very serious problem, and I think that it's often unrecognized or it's often a taboo inside Black communities. And I know something about this from my own family experience, and as my sister and many relatives lived with mental illness, and so I do want to say that I understand what you're saying, but I also want to assert that it is a real thing with real issues in Canadian society too, and including in Black communities.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to ask, how important is it for us to be seen? Because I remember there was a point where Beatrice felt that it's as though the hunters couldn't see her properly. Seeing somebody isn't just enough. People choose to see you through different lenses. So how important is it to be seen? If I ask, I shouldn't ask what determines. Different things can determine the lenses people choose to see people through. But how important is it to be seen authentically?
Well, if somebody knows our name and looks us in the eye and speak to us with kindness in their heart, it's a way of recognizing our own humanity. If somebody knows your name, perhaps takes your hand or doesn't, looks you in the eye, acknowledges that you are there, it's a way of saying, not just I see you like in a physiological way, but I'm here with you together on this planet and I feel your humanity. And so having your name understood, having it repeated, having your eyes engaged with, these are all essential to I think the human experience. I mean, just think about babies. Yesterday, I went to visit my great niece. So I have a niece who's like a daughter to me. She often lived with me when her own mother was ill. And now she has an 18-month-old baby named Maya. So I went to visit Maya yesterday, and she doesn't have many words yet because she's only, 17 months old. But she was just staring at me in my face as I was reading stories to her at bedtime, and she'd turn the pages with her hand, even though she couldn't, of course, read yet. And even a child knows the significance of the connection of human eyes. And even a child, a baby, knows to look right into your eyes and to examine you and to be seen. And so to answer your question, I think it's a rhetorical question. I think you know as well as I do that to be seen is to be recognized as a human being.
Yeah, thank you. When when you mentioned, saying people's names, for us as Africans, names are really, really important. For me, my first name is Onolunosen. That's the one who has done well. But I choose to go by Louisa sometimes because I go, when you speak, for us, we believe when you speak at someone's name, you speak into that person's life. So if you don't pronounce that name right, you might be saying go away. so most of the time it's just safer to say, okay, fine. Then the importance of name, it took me back to your book, the Book of Negroes, as they were being taken away on the ship. And all of them started to say their names, mention your name, call out your name, call out your name before you lose your identity and all of that. The power of names.
Tell me your name again, Louisa.
Ononunosen.
Ononunosen.
I can write it in the chat so I can spell it out for you. Then.
Yes, I'd like to. Thank you.
I'll text it to you. Don't worry. I will spell it out. I'll text it to you.
Thank you.
All right. Alice, you had your hand up.
Yes, I wanted to push your question a little bit further. So one of the things that I have noticed, word wild, being Black is something that is pretty much that you have to fight for, basically. You have to fight for being acknowledged, being accepted. How many times, and I traveled a lot, and how many times I was asked, oh my God, your English so good. Where did you learn it? School, like everybody. What do you mean when I do learn it? Or someone will say, oh my God, you speak French too? Why is it so surprising that a Black person can speak more than one language? And no, we don't speak all tribe language. Actually, I don't think I speak any tribe language, but all that to say that sometimes I find that as a Black person, I have to always explain why I am the way I am, while my counterparts are navigating life and nobody's asking them that question. So through your books, and one of the things that I love about your writing is that you have always put Black people within a space where we can see ourselves as the warriors and the queens and the beautiful people that we are, because let's be honest. Oh, sorry, my daughter is distracting me. Come in, Baba. But it's one of the things that I love about your books is being acknowledged and being celebrated. Let's use the real word, being celebrated. It's something that is rare, but that is appreciated. And my question is it something that you have given yourself as a mission, or is it just naturally coming in? I'm sorry, I'm just gonna open the door for my daughter and I will be right back.
Okay, please go open the door, no problem. I'll wait for Alice to come back before I attempt to answer her question.
Yes, but for me, okay, so while Alice is gone, for me, I just, looking through this book, there's a lot for children to take away from this, but I'm feeling, do you think 9 to 14-year-olds will get, oh, hi, Anne. Okay. Do you think it will be easy for 9 to 14-year-olds to see and understand this book, the way we as adults, to see this book through the lens we adults are seeing it through? Do you think 9 to 14-year-olds will understand that Aguila could be a physical forest or it could be a state of mind? Do you think they will understand that?
I think that every reader brings their own perspective to a book. It's not just 9 to 14-year-olds versus a person who's in their 40s or 50s or 60s. We all bring our own experiences, our own perspectives to the act of reading. And surely, Louisa, the way that you encounter the book, won't be exactly the same as the way Alice, or Esther encounter the book. You will have your own individual experiences, and it's not a question of being right or wrong. You'll take your life into perspective as you encounter a story. So, of course, a 9 to 14-year-old is not likely to encounter the book in the same way that you are, but they'll encounter it in their own way, and I hope that will be very beautiful for them too. And I've heard from many students, who've read the book and who've written me letters or sent me the art that they wrote that was inspired by the book, and it's very touching. And I was talking earlier about the Guzulim being one of the silly words in the book that represents the human soul, a mysterious organ in the body that represents a human soul. And the other day, a boy wrote to me, and he said, he was about 9 or 10, and he said, my teacher made me read this book, but it's okay. anyway, even though my teacher made me read it. But I want to tell you, Mr. Hill, that to write a book like this, you must have a big goozlem. And it was a very beautiful. It was a very beautiful thing to say, and it touched me profoundly. And I love to hear from children. So, of course, a child won't bring the same life experience, Louisa, that you will bring to the reading, but it doesn't mean that their reading is any less valid. And they may come back to it, 5 or 10 years later and read it again and perceive it in a different way.
Thank you so much. Does any other person have any more questions to ask?
I think Alice is back. I can try to answer her question now, if that's okay. And I don't know if you've seen it, Alice, but I have a memoir called called Blackberry Sweet Juice on being Black and white in Canada. It came out about 21 years ago, actually. But in that memoir, there's a chapter which I think might appeal to you and entertain you called So What Are You Anyway? And it's a chapter that analyzes the experience of being constantly asked, just like you, and, I speak French and also Spanish, being constantly asked to defend or to explain my identity, people expressing surprise that I can do one thing or another, and to defend, as you say, our wholeness as people, and to ward off the surprise that people sometimes show that we can do this or that we can do that, and always to be interrogated about my origins, whereas a typical white Canadian wouldn't be necessarily interrogated the same way about what they are anyway. And so I did write a chapter on that subject in the book Blackberry Sweet Juice on being Black and white in Canada, and it might you might find some commonality in that chapter, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's definitely going to, that's my next read.
Okay. Thank you so much. I see that it's past 1, and please, I am going. Please, let's start by giving Lawrence Hill hearts. Please, let's give him hearts in the reactions box. Let's give him hearts. Those of us who are here, please, let's give him hearts. I just want to say a big thank you. Please, I am going to send you my children's book.
Great.
Oh yes, I'm just going to give it to you.
Thank you.
To read and let me know what you think. So I'll post it to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please, for those of us who have a copy of physical copies of the book, please. Esther, can you take a screenshot? Do you have yours? Or is yours an ebook? Okay.
I read the ebook.
Lydia, please hold up your book. I want us to take
Please wait for Khalid. I want him to be there.
minutes?
Khalid, I need you. Sorry, I'm recruiting.
He was here, and he was our young generation representative.
We even have a dice in her car, and she's still here.
I am on a mission to recruit young readers, boys.
Yes, I agree with you.
Come on, Khalid.
So where is he? Oh, that's
You have no idea.
How do we take a screenshot then?
Okay,
Okay, don't worry about it. I'm gonna try to make it work.
Don't worry, my fingers are long enough. Okay.
Anna?
Okay, yes, I can.
You can?
Yes, I
okay,
can.
he's here now.
Okay, otherwise can you hold it?
That's fine.
There
Okay.
you go.
So
right there.
everybody, big smile. Thank you so much. So please send me an address. I can post the book to you. So I'll send the book. So once again, I am so honored.
Louisa, sorry. I have a Yoruba name for Mr. Hill here.
Yes, what is the Yoruba name?
Omowale. The child has come home.
Omowale. Okay, I will text it to him then. The child has come home.
Thank you for all your history lessons.
Yes.
Under the disguise of fiction. Thank you for teaching us about our ancestors. Our educational background, unfortunately, failed us. They shielded us from a lot of things. So I want to say thank you for that. Thank you.
Those of us
and I will add that it's not only for us, it's for the generation, because for some of us, we grew up in Africa, or Caribbeans, but for our children who are growing up in Canada, you offering them history and the possibility to learn from their background, that's even bigger. Thank you very much. And thank you for being here today.
Yes, for those of us who grew up in Nigeria, back home in West Africa, history, we were not really taught about Africans. We were taught about Britain, the amalgamation, Lord Lugard, and all of that. So as adults, we've taken it upon ourselves now to start to know about our history. Slavery was romanticized for the longest time. And then I remember when I came across Book of Negroes, that's the first book, apart from the movie Amistad, where I saw a breakdown of the slave ship experience. Especially the guy who was a slave catcher, who would help these people catch the slaves. Then when he got to the seashore, he too was sold. So yeah. So thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Honor Nulosan, and thank you so much to everyone. I will send you my address.
Okay.
And it was a beautiful encounter, and I will be coming to Ottawa from time to time because my daughter is about to have a baby in Ottawa, and so I'll be visiting my grandchild regularly. And thank you so much.
Please let us know. We will meet you for coffee or anything, because many of us are local and we hang out from time to time. So if you are going to be here, please let us know. Yes, at least so you can try jollof rice.
Thank you. I would love that. Take good care, and thank you for sharing the day with me.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.